book of Job. And even then, God is still worthy of worship. Whether we see the end result or not, God is God, we are humans, and He is worthy to be worshiped, whether it's beneficial or not. Secondly, another important lesson is that trials are ultimately from God. Trials in the life of a believer are always ultimately from God. Do you remember in those opening chapters where we emphasized this? Oh, I know it was Satan who brought the hail. It was Satan who was given power to have lightning to strike Job's children. So it might be tempting for us to say, well, it came from the devil. Yes, it did come from the devil, but the devil was in God's hands. It was God who marked out the parameters, who said, so far and no farther. It was God who said, you may take his children, but you may not touch his life. It was God who said, you may take his health, but even then you may not touch his life. In other words, back behind the tragedy that Job experienced was still the hand of God. Yes, all of these concerns of nature, the ravages of nature were in Satan's hands, but Satan, I shall say it, Satan is in God's hands. You've heard me quote the words of Luther, even the devil is God's devil. Now let's think about that accident on I-94. One day I was just musing in my mind regarding the contingencies in order for that to happen. The Willis family was on that highway because there was an election here in the city of Chicago, and their church was being used as a polling booth. And so they decided that this would be a good day to visit another son who was a student in a university near Milwaukee. And then you begin to think of the fact that this piece of iron could have fallen from the truck at a different point in the highway. The Willis family could have begun 60 seconds earlier or 60 seconds later, or the truck could have been in a different position in the highway, and the piece of metal itself could have flown into the ditch. There were so many different contingencies, so many different what-ifs, and yet who is it that controls the what-ifs of life? Is it not true that as Christians we have to take all of the ifs and then we have to draw around them a circle called the providence of God and recognize that even such accidents are highly planned occurrences from the standpoint of God's sovereign intervention in the life of His children? So let us say it boldly. It was God who took the 6 children from the Willis family, and they themselves acknowledged that. Because God is bigger than a truck whose metal falls onto the pavement. God is bigger than having the contingency where that metal would just puncture the gas tank. God is not subject to the futility of these random events. What is random to you and to me in the life of a believer is really planned by God, so that the believer can say confidently, all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to His purpose. You're driving along the city of Chicago. Traffic lights hinder you. The expressway is full of cars, traffic jams. There are all of these things that bother you. There are people at work that bother you. There are bosses that bother you, and there are co-workers who trouble your soul and who make life very miserable. Is God in these kinds of things? Are these just the happenstances of life that we need to endure because there's no other alternative except to endure them? Or can we take our piece of chalk and even include the providence of God around those events in the life of a believer? The answer is yes, if you have the faith to grasp it. Because all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to His purpose. And that means all things, including injustices. Trials are ultimately from God. This is Pastor Lutzer, and as you know, we are getting to the end of our series of messages on the book of Job. And indeed, it is very important for us to understand God's sovereignty and what lessons this book teaches us about ourselves and also about God. I need to tell you, and I speak here from personal experience, that if all that you see as a result of your hardship, if all that you see is the devil, you're going to be very discouraged. But if you see all things working together for your good as a believer, if you begin to see God even in the harsh experiences of life, you'll be able to endure them. God will grant you the grace, and He Himself will be glorified. Tune in next time as we continue this series on the book of Job.
Thank you, Dr. Lutzer. Erwin Lutzer has now wrapped up part 2 of The Purpose of It All, the last message in his series, God, Why Me? The Story of Job. Running to Win comes to you from the Moody Church in Chicago. This 8-part series can be yours on CD as our thank you when you give a gift of any amount to support Running to Win. Just call us at 1-800-215-5001. That's 1-800-215-5001. Ask about God, Why Me? When you call. Online, go to offerrtw.com. That's offerrtw, all one word, .com. Or write to Running to Win at Box 11174, Chicago, Illinois, 60611. This is Dave McAllister. Tomorrow, a final time with Job. That's coming up on our next Running to Win.